Good afternoon, everybody who's attending after at the public open house here for Township of Addington Highlands official plan update. We're running the open house from 4 to 6 p.m. In person at the Addington Highlands Community Center in Denbigh, and also hosting virtually for the initial presentation at the start of the open house. So joining me today are Christine Reed and Patricia Gray from the Township, and also my colleague Owen Wood, and my name is Mark Tao. I'm a planner with the Boulevard Group. So we are going to provide a brief presentation on the adoption or the circulation draft of the proposed official plan update for the township. And then there'll be an opportunity for Q&A at the end of the presentation, after which the open house will continue in person until 6 p.m. tonight. We'll hold questions until the end of the presentation, at which time we'll take questions either live, if you raise your hand, or if you put your questions in the chat, we can answer them there as well. So with that, I'll begin. Okay. All right. Yeah, let me just do that here. Oh, caption settings.
Very top.
Okay, we're just changing. There we go. Well, we can. That's
So you're showing up on a video.
okay. There we go. Okay. Sorry about that. So to begin, what is an official plan? So an official plan is a document that is used to provide broad planning directions for the municipality over the life of the plan. And I'm just going to double check. I think our presentation here is our open house boards. Let me just see. We've got. Yeah, so Patricia, these are the boards from the open house rather than the presentation. Let me just check here and see. Yeah, no problem. All right, give us a moment. We're just gonna rework the presentation here and we'll be right back. Share. All right. So I think we're back. Thank you for your patience. So as I said, we'll proceed with the presentation to start the open house and have a time for questions and answers from those who are participating, and then proceed to the in-person segment of the open house. So presentation, we'll just briefly touch on the project as far as the OP update from start to where we are today and to where we're heading. And then we'll highlight provincial and county level policy changes that affect the official plan update, and then talk about high points of the proposed update itself through the OP, and then review quickly the draft official plan schedules, samples of each of the types, and then go on to next steps for the project and wrap up with questions. So currently we're in what is phase 3 of a 4-phase project. The project started about 5 years ago and was delayed due to provincial and county level official plan and provincial planning statement changes. So as those changes were made at the provincial level and the county level, the township worked away on background assessments and including existing condition report as well as discussion papers. The discussion papers were presented to the public between spring 2023 and then in the fall of 2025. And also at that time, there's also open house and opportunities for stakeholder input and community input on those discussion papers that have led into the first draft of the OP update, which is the circulation draft that is now out for public and agency review and comment. So currently, we're hosting open house today, and then public comments are being asked to be provided by the end of August. And after that, we'll move to phase 4, which is the adoption draft phase, where an updated version of the draft official plan update is presented at a statutory public meeting. Any final comments integrated into the plan and then presented to Township Council for adoption before it's sent to the county for their review for approval. At a high level, the provincial level, a number of changes have happened to planning policy as well as planning legislation since the last update to the official plan, which occurred in 2014. So the provincial planning statement has been updated not once but twice in 2020 and 2024. There's currently the provincial planning statement 2024 that's in effect. And so policy changes in that document are integrated into the draft official plan update. For Township of Addington Highlands, changes are limited. A lot of the existing policies at the provincial level as they relate to Addington Highlands and rural residential, waterfront growth, protection of resources, and natural areas are largely unchanged or strengthened. Provincially, legislation has also changed over the last 5 years in particular, where the province has made a number of changes to legislation to encourage provision of housing, including more affordable housing options. So one of those that appears in the draft official plan update is allowances for what are called additional residential units, or ARUs. So these are additional residential units on a residential property and either take the form of apartments in existing houses or additions to existing houses, or even an entirely separate structure that would be considered as an additional unit on that residential property. For the most part, this means that you could have up to 2 or 3 residential units in total on a property, subject to limitations related to servicing primarily, but also lot size, access, and other limitations. Other changes have happened at the province that affect the LP update and the township's planning approach. It includes limitations on pre-consultation before applications are filed, as well as study requirements. And there's also recently, or in the last 2 years, limitations on appeals by private landowners on applications that are on properties neighboring to them. The province has typically, in most cases, limited or restricted those appeals. And at the county level, the official plan for the county was first created in 2016 after the last official plan update for the township. And they just completed earlier this year their first update, which is OPA 3. So there are changes at the county official plan that affect township official plan updates, primarily related to natural heritage, environmental protection, mapping of certain areas, as well as related policies on aggregate resources, mineral protection, and population projections and housing policies. So these all together combined feed into the official plan update. There are also local township driven changes to the official plan. So things that the township has identified, whether at staff or county or council level, or through feedback from the public. And these also play an important part of the update to the official plan. This slide shows the basic outline of the official plan. So similar to the official plan as it exists today, most of the policy sections are the same. The three that are bolded, so land use in section 4, general development policies in section 5, and natural heritage and hazard policies in section 6. These are the ones that are probably most impactful. And so we'll look at some of those as part of the presentation today. So I'll go through and highlight some of the key policy changes that are proposed, some of this coming as direction from council and as a result of the background and discussion papers on key subjects related to things like housing and waterfront development. So consents or severances currently are limited to a total of 3 lots from a larger lot as it existed in the early 2000s or in 2004 when the township was amalgamated, or shortly after the township was amalgamated and the new official plan was enacted. So council has directed that the draft policy be updated to allow up to 5 lots from a single lot as of 2004, going back to 2004. The current policy direction or proposed policy direction is that there would be 5 lots, but that would be limited to no more than 3 where the lot is accessed by a private road, which is typically in waterfront areas. The next policy change proposed is related to these additional residential units that I spoke to earlier in the presentation. So currently today, there are no policies in the official plan about allowing additional residential units. And so that's proposed to be added so that you can have up to 3 residential units per property, essentially. So there's an existing dwelling on the property, another dwelling unit could be added to that house, or a separate house could be constructed. And there could also be a third dwelling unit added to the property in certain circumstances. There are limitations in the waterfront areas, which would be limited to 1 additional residential unit on waterfront lots, but that would be subject to minimum lot size being met for a waterfront lot, so 2.5 acres or 1 hectare, and also that there isn't already an existing sleeping cabin, for example. And on top of all this, any new residential unit would have to be serviced adequately by water and septic systems. So even if there is an allowance, there'd be conditions applied before a building permit could be issued, or if a building permit could be issued. The other key policy, one of the other key policy changes proposed is in relation to multi-unit development to support more options for affordable housing. The official plan today currently allows apartment buildings essentially in hamlet areas, so up to 10 units in a hamlet. But in the rural areas, it's limited to essentially a 1 unit per lot. So in addition to the allowance for additional residential units, which could allow up to 3 units per lot or 2 units in waterfront areas, the policies are also proposed to be updated to essentially take the specific limitation or allowance for 10 units in hamlet areas and just provide a more generic policy that encourages multiple units and a variety of housing types wherever they can be supported in the municipality based on availability of water and septic services, as well as access, appropriate lot sizes, and that they respect the character of the area in which they're located. So the intent here is to provide some opportunities for larger residential uses, typically rental units that would hopefully be an affordable housing option in the municipality, and that these not these are not necessarily limited to hamlet areas only. The other area of change that was also looked at by council and the township as leading up to the release of the adoption or the circulation draft is changing the seasonal and year-round residential policies for uses in the official plan to consolidate them into a waterfront residential policy area. So as the township has seen and has seen in many municipalities, a lot of cottage properties that used to be traditionally seasonal have been converted and are being converted on a fairly regular basis to year-round homes or year-round capable homes. The policies that kind of treat waterfront residential as seasonal use only with limited use and limited impact need to be updated to address properties that are being used year-round and maybe more intensively than originally conceived when the policies were put in place. So the policies essentially deal with how waterfront residential as a whole should proceed. So whether it's creating new lots or creating new dwellings on existing lots or changing existing dwellings by doing additions or renovations, tear down and rebuilds. For the most part, the policies are similar in terms of putting in requirements related to water body setbacks and requirements for adequate services. But there's also limitations or updates related to how those new lots might be created and servicing requirements. So the policies in section 4.7.3 contain some of these, as well as 4.7.1. And then further on in the presentation, we'll speak to changes to environmental policies as it relates to water body setbacks, for example, and how those might affect waterfront residential development. Related to this, a new section is proposed to be added regarding land use compatibility. So this can include things like compatibility between a residential use and a commercial or industrial use, but it can also deal with compatibility between apartment buildings or multiple unit building and a single detached dwelling, and also the visual character. So if we're looking at waterfront areas or other areas that might be more sensitive to redevelopment or change, policies provide some direction on what council would like to see when those changes might happen. So that's in section 5.8.1 and ongoing. So it doesn't necessarily impose new requirements, but it does provide some guidance to council, to committee of adjustment or staff when they're evaluating applications that might come in for new development that could create potential for compatibility issues with existing neighboring development. And finally, policies related to natural heritage. So this is typically wetlands and water bodies. In the township, there are many lakes and waterfront areas that are developed and also many areas that are undeveloped or underdeveloped. There are also many unevaluated wetlands. And so the township provides policies about how new development should occur in relation to these water bodies, wetlands, and other natural features. Currently, the official plan policies require minimum setbacks from these features, and then they also contain policies that direct how development would happen on existing lots where there's already, say, a cottage that's closer than 30 meters to the water. So these policies have been updated to match the county official plan policies regarding these items, including allowances for how changes to existing cottages can happen where they aren't meeting current setbacks, and what might be required to demonstrate that they're appropriate or that they are not affecting the water body or the wetland that they're adjacent to. So these policies are largely consistent with what is currently in the official plan, but do provide some additional information and direction to assist with reviewing applications and providing guidance to staff, to the Committee of Adjustment and Council when reviewing new proposals. And on to the official plan schedules. There are 4 types of schedules. There's a land use schedule, which is Schedule A, and these provide designations for the land uses. So broadly, there's rural, which is the white area on the screen, and there's the reddish color, which is the hamlet areas. The gray is the crown lands, and then the blue is water bodies, water courses, etc. And then Schedule B shows where primarily natural resources are located. So this could be sand and gravel pits or bedrock resources. And it also shows areas of natural hazards. This could include areas of floodplain or high likelihood of wildfire origination. So these provide just direction and information about where these resources might be located and guidance about maybe where other land uses should avoid being developed. Schedule C is natural heritage. These are environmental features like lakes, water bodies, wetlands, water courses, areas of natural and scientific interest, lake trout lakes, provincial parks, conservation reserves. So again, this provides a key map, I guess, for how and where development can occur in relation to these areas, together with the written policies. And last schedule is a transportation network, which by and large simply identifies where provincial, county, township roads are, as well as known private roads. So next steps. As I said at the beginning of the presentation, we're currently in the process of receiving comments from the community, public, stakeholders, the county, review agencies like the Conservation Authority, and these will be integrated into a second draft of the official plan that will be presented at a statutory public meeting, hopefully later this year, before being brought to council for adoption and then forwarded to the County of Lennox and Addington for their review and eventual approval. That concludes the formal presentation. Happy to take any questions from attendees. Maybe just see if there's any raised hands. I think Trisha's gonna take a look and see who might be in the gallery. We do see a couple people in the gallery, in the audience who are watching. We don't see any hands raised or any questions in the chat. If there are any questions, if you want to raise your hands or otherwise put them in the chat.
You have it says the host has disabled attendee chat.
Okay. All right. So actually, we can hear you here. So happy to take a live and in-person question if that's, and then we can see if we can get the chat enabled here for entering questions into the chat.
Okay, yeah, I wasn't able to type it. So good afternoon. My name is Robert Friedland. I own a building lot in the town of Northbrook, as well as an acreage property and house in Caladar. The Northbrook property was purchased with the intention of building rental units. And my understanding now that the law only allows for one primary resident and one additional rental unit. I'm hoping that this plan will allow for 2 additional rental units on top of the primary residential unit. I'm hoping as well that they could be of equal size, because currently there are restrictions as to, for example, if the primary residence, I think, has to be like twice the size of the other 2, or they can only be 50%. So the additional units can only be 50% of the size of the primary unit or home, where ideally they should be able to do equal size. For example, you should be able to build like 3 sort of almost townhouse style, for example, 3 2-bedroom apartments of 1,500 or 1,200 square feet each unit, a total of, let's say, 3,600 to 40 to 4,500 square feet. But currently that's not my understanding. There has to be like the primary residence and then these much smaller units added on. It would be much simpler if they could be, 3 units the same size. And there's no sort of requirement for the primary um, a unit being significantly larger than the additional units. Is that the case? I'm a little confused. And is my understanding is 3 units is the maximum?
Yeah, no, great question. And yes, so there's a couple of changes that are happening. So currently the zoning bylaw does allow one additional residential unit, and it is, as you've laid out, subject to some restrictions about size and location. So, can't be bigger than the main existing unit. And so that's all proposed to, or those types of restrictions are proposed to be removed. And so the first allowance would be, other than a waterfront lot, it would be intended to allow up to 3 residential units per property. And there wouldn't be those size restrictions that you've identified or that are in the current zoning bylaw to say that, you have to have one primary unit that's bigger, and then your second unit or your third unit can only be so big, like 50% the size of the main unit. So that's proposed to be removed. And so it would just be essentially up to 3 units could be permitted, provided that you've got adequate lot size and septic and well capacity. And then, 2 or 3 units could all be contained within one building, or you could have two units in one building and then a third unit in a separate building. So kind of like two units in a house, and then maybe a second unit either in a garage or in a tiny house, something like that in the rear yard. And then on top of that, as the other thing I noted in the presentation is that the municipality, at least through the official plan, isn't proposing to place a limit on the number of units in rural areas or in hamlet areas, other than maybe waterfront areas. So that might allow for small apartments, either in the hamlets, certainly in the hamlets, and potentially in the rural areas, provided the lots are big enough and that there's adequate water and septic again. So I think the intent is to move towards a much more permissive policy, and then zoning allowances for additional residential units, and also maybe even for small apartments where there's adequate services and lot sizes.
Right. Okay, great. Thank you very much.
Yeah. And I think we've made some changes to the chat as well. So
Yeah,
hopefully, yes. Okay.
it appears and it's enabled now. It appears so.
Great. Okay.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. All right. Not sure if there's anybody else. We did see 1 or 2 other people, attendees. So happy to take a question or comments through the chat or in person. And of course, you can also provide questions or comments in writing through the township, through Patricia Gray at the township as well. I don't see anybody with hands up. But if you do have comments, feel free to unmute and you can go ahead and speak. And if not, you can wait another minute or two and see if anybody has any comments. And then otherwise, we'll conclude the webinar portion of the open house and just proceed to the rest of the open house. All right, so thank you to everybody who's attended, and we'll resume with the in-person portion of the open house now.